Chapter 11. Why did I feel that cold shiver of fear when Jonathan suggested we ride up to the falls? I was angry at myself for feeling it. I had no reason to be afraid of Jonathan. He seems to really like me. A horrible thing had happened up at the falls, but there was no reason to be frightened of Jonathan. I realized that Jonathan was trying to get over Louisa, trying to get over her death. By returning to the falls with me, he was forcing himself to get on with his life. He was putting Louisa behind him, putting all the horror behind him. That was my reasoning. I wish I had the courage to ask Jonathan if I was right, but I didn't feel I knew him well enough yet to bring it up. He had never mentioned Louisa to me. I didn't think it was right for me to be the first to bring her up. We rode in the middle of the street. There was little traffic. Lawns were being mowed and raked, flowers were being planted, gardens were being tended, weeds were being pulled. A group of little kids were gleefully climbing through the open walls of a new house being built. "This is my room," the little boy cried. "No, that's the kitchen," another boy corrected him. "How you doing?" Jonathan called back to me. He had gotten about 3 car lengths ahead. "Fine, I like this bike," I shouted. "That's Caleb's house, remember?" Jonathan said, pointing to a square white clapboard house with a ragged low hedge running along the front. And just as Jonathan pointed, Caleb appeared on a gravel driveway. "Hey," he called, spotting us immediately. "Where are you going?" Jonathan wheeled around and pedaled onto the drive, his tires sliding over the gravel as he hit the brakes. His front tire came to a stop less than an inch from Caleb, who, grinning, raised both hands over his head in surrender. I pulled up beside Jonathan and lowered both feet to the gravel. "Hot day, huh?" Caleb said, grinning at me, pushing his scraggly hair back off his forehead. The gold earring in his ear sparkled in the sunlight. "Why don't we talk about the weather for a while?" Jonathan said sarcastically. He gazed up at Caleb's house. Someone was watching us from the front window. Caleb's mom, I guess. "You get your bike fixed?" Jonathan asked. "Pretty much," Caleb replied, grinning. "Want to come with us?" Jonathan offered. Caleb nodded. "I haven't had any better offers." He wiped his hands off on the legs of his jeans. "I'll get my bike. The tires are low, but that's okay." He started toward the back of the house, kicking up the gravel as he walked. After a few steps, he turned back. "Where are we riding?" "Up to the falls," I answered. "Huh?" Caleb's mouth dropped open. "What did you say?" His eyes were on Jonathan. "Up to the falls," I repeated softly, surprised by Caleb's reaction. Caleb continued to stare at Jonathan. "You sure?" "Yeah, we're sure," Jonathan snapped. "You coming before supper time or not? My bike is rusting waiting for you." "Hey, you're in a good mood," Caleb muttered. "Sure you want me to come along?" "Get your bike," Jonathan instructed him. Caleb disappeared around the back of the house. "Someone should mow Caleb's lawn," I said, gazing at the tall, overgrown grass and flourishing weeds. "His parents don't trust him with a lawnmower," Jonathan replied, grinning. "They know he'd probably cut his foot off." After a short while, Caleb came sailing down on a rickety old BMX bike, the seat raised up as high as it would go, both tires nearly flat. "To the falls," he cried, rolling past us, out of the driveway and into the street without slowing to look for cars. "He's really messed up," Jonathan muttered to me, shaking his head. Caleb was twirling his bike in tight circles, waiting for us, singing at the top of his lungs. "He's your best friend," I said dryly. "Why?" Jonathan asked, making a bewildered face. Laughing, we followed Caleb into the street. We pedaled single file to town, which was crowded and busy, with cars actually double parked on Main Street. Most people were going into the garden store and the hardware store. Spring fix-up time. Past town, the road started to climb through the woods. Jonathan and I rode side by side behind Caleb, who zigzagged wildly from one side of the road to the other, riding no hands most of the time. After a bit, the road leveled out, and I could see a large red truck coming toward us in the near distance. "Hey, get over!" Jonathan called to Caleb. Caleb was riding no hands in the left lane, the lane the truck was in. Staying in the wrong lane, Caleb turned back to us, a devilish grin on his face, his dark eyes glowing. "Watch what I do with this guy," he called. "No way, get over!" Jonathan screamed. The red truck, an enormous van, seemed to grow larger as it approached. "Watch," Caleb cried. "Get over!" Jonathan screamed. Caleb stayed on the wrong side, pedaling steadily, calmly, as if he had every right to be there, as if there wasn't a huge truck barreling right at him. "This is stupid!" Jonathan screamed. His eyes were bugging out with fright. The truck honked its horn, a long, earth-shaking diesel honk. "Get over, idiot!" I could barely hear Jonathan shout, over the roar of the truck horn. A wild grin on his face, Caleb just kept pedaling. The truck wasn't slowing down. It rumbled closer. Closer. Caleb, please! I closed my eyes as the blaring horn became an angry, deafening scream. Chapter 12. The ground seemed to shake. I felt a powerful rush of hot air which nearly blew me over. When I opened my eyes, I saw Caleb seated on his bike, both feet on the ground on the other side of the road. He grinned at Jonathan and me and raised his fist triumphantly, cheering loudly for himself. Jonathan tossed down his bike and angrily strode across the road to Caleb. I could hear the truck rumbling away from us. It still felt to me as if the ground were shaking. My heart was thudding in my chest. I felt dizzy. Straddling my bike, I stared across the road at Caleb as if he were a mirage. "You could have been killed, man," Jonathan screamed angrily at him. "No way," Caleb insisted, his arms crossed over his chest, his face bearing its usual goofy grin. "I've got timing." "Timing? You're crazy," Jonathan insisted. "It's all timing," Caleb bragged, ignoring Jonathan's anger. Caleb turned his eyes to me. "Did you see the look on that truck driver's face?" "No, I didn't see anything," I admitted. "I closed my eyes." My legs were all trembly. My mouth was dry. "I thought his face was going to explode," Caleb laughed. "That was real dumb," Jonathan said, scowling. "I didn't get hit, did I?" Caleb demanded. "If I got hit, that would be dumb. If I'm lying here flat as a pancake, then that's dumb. But I've got the timing down. You know that, Jonathan." Jonathan glared angrily at Caleb. He leaned close to his friend and lowered his voice, but I heard what he said anyway. He told Caleb, "You're just showing off for Annie." "Huh? Who, me?" Caleb glanced over Jonathan's shoulder at me. "No way, Jonathan." Jonathan tossed his hands up as if conceding defeat. "Are we going to ride or not?" "Yeah, sure. Let's go," Caleb replied, sounding hurt. Jonathan walked quickly across the road, picked up his bike, and climbed onto it without looking at me. I could see that his mood had changed. Caleb's game of chicken with the truck had really upset him. "He could have pulled it that time," Jonathan muttered, more to himself than to me. We started to pedal, slowly picking up speed as the road curved through the woods, climbing toward the falls. "Why does Caleb like to play such dangerous games?" I asked. "Because I'm a dangerous guy," Caleb exclaimed, overhearing me. He laughed gleefully. "I'm so dangerous." Jonathan just scowled. A few minutes later, we turned off the road onto the bike path that led up to the top of the falls. The falls were more beautiful than I'd remembered, the water sparkling like silver under the sun as it washed straight down from the cliff edge. "It smells so fresh and clean up here," I said, closing my eyes and taking a deep breath. We left our bikes on the bike path. I turned away from the falls to look at the woods. The leaves were all opening. The woods were so much brighter and greener than a week before. I hoped that the beautiful scenery would help return Jonathan's good spirits, but when I turned back to the falls, I was startled to see that he had stepped right to the cliff edge and was peering down, a grim expression on his face. That's just where he'd stood when I first met him, I realized, feeling a sudden wave of dread sweep over my body. That's just where he stood, on the very edge, staring down so sadly. I had thought then that Jonathan was going to jump. I could feel my face grow hot remembering that. I suddenly became aware that Caleb had moved beside me. He was staring at Jonathan, too. "I knew we shouldn't have come up here," Caleb said to me in a low voice, keeping his eyes on Jonathan. "I knew he wasn't ready to come up here yet." "He was in a really good mood before," I said, feeling the cold spray off the falls on my face. "Now he's not," Caleb said sharply, shaking his head. "We shouldn't be here." He moved away from me and headed toward Jonathan, stopping a few feet from the edge. "Hey, Jonathan." Jonathan didn't turn around. He stood motionless, staring straight down into the streaming rush of white water. "Jonathan, let's go," Caleb insisted, reaching out a hand as if intending to pull Jonathan away. No reaction. "Jonathan, let's go, okay?" I took a few steps closer, suddenly very worried about Jonathan. What was he thinking about? What was he looking for? Why wouldn't he answer Caleb? Why wouldn't he step back from the cliff edge? I stepped up beside Caleb, who had looked really worried. I think it was the first time I had seen Caleb with a serious expression on his face. "Jonathan," he called. "Earth calling Jonathan." "Just a second," Jonathan said, not turning around. "Come on, man," Caleb urged. "Just a second," Jonathan repeated. "That's all it takes. A second, a split second, and then you're dead. Gone forever." Caleb glanced at me, his features tight with worry. Then he grabbed Jonathan by the shoulder and pulled him back. "Hey, what's the problem? Let go," Jonathan protested. "You're scaring us, man," Caleb told him, not letting go. He was pulling Jonathan back from the cliff edge with both hands. The spray drenched my face and hair. I suddenly felt cold, despite the bright sun overhead. I'm okay, Jonathan insisted. I don't like to hear you talking like that, Caleb said. Let's keep riding, I suggested, trying to sound cheerful. Yeah, good idea, Caleb said. I turned toward the bike path and screamed. Hey! Someone was back there, messing with my bike. Hey, get away! I screamed. Brushing the spray from my eyes, I began running to my bike. The intruder had picked up my bike off the ground and was doing something to the handlebars. I had only gone a few steps when I recognized who it was. Ruby. Chapter 13. Hey, get away! My sneakers pounded the dirt, kicking up dust as I ran toward Ruby. I could hear Jonathan and Caleb running behind me. Huh? Ruby stood holding my bike by the handlebars, staring at me open-mouthed, her red hair disheveled, gleaming in the bright sunlight. I pulled up in front of her, gasping for breath. What are you doing to my bike? I demanded angrily. I'm just looking at it, she snapped back. It's a lot like my cousin's bike. I glared at her angrily, trying to catch my breath. I wasn't going to steal it or anything, she said, turning her snub nose up. What's the problem? Caleb asked, running up beside me. Annie thought I was going to run away with her bike, Ruby told him, frowning. I just wanted to look at it. Here. She pushed the bike toward me. I grabbed the frame and the seat to keep it from toppling over. Ruby, I'm sorry, I started. I'm not a thief, you know, Ruby said nastily. Hey, Annie didn't mean it, Caleb said, trying to be helpful. Remember? Someone slashed my tires last week, I told Ruby. That's why I thought... Well, it wasn't me, Ruby interrupted. I felt really embarrassed. I come running after Ruby like a crazy person, screaming at her, accusing her, and she was just looking at the bike. I'm really sorry, I said sincerely. Really, I didn't mean... Okay, Ruby said impatiently. Her bike was lying on its side a few feet down the bike path. She picked it up and walked it back toward the tall granite rocks. I wheeled mine after her, and Caleb followed. Where is Dawn? Ruby asked, shielding her eyes from the sun with one hand as her eyes followed the curve of the sloping bike path. Is Dawn with you? Caleb asked, following Ruby's gaze. Here she comes, Ruby announced. I saw Dawn standing up as she pedaled, moving slowly up the hill. A few seconds later, she hopped off her bike and walked it up to us. She was red-faced and out of breath. Her dark hair was wet, a large strand matted across her perspiring forehead. Wow, I'm a little out of shape, she exclaimed breathlessly. I've got to lose some weight. You look okay, Caleb said gallantly. He laughed. You just need a better bike. Yours is too heavy. You should get one like Annie's. But don't touch Annie's, whatever you do, Ruby warned sarcastically, flashing me a dirty look. If you touch her bike, she freaks. Huh? Dawn gazed at me, puzzled. I leaned back against the rocks. I made a mistake, I muttered. I didn't mean... Did you get that bike new or used? Ruby asked. Used? I told her. It looks brand new, she said. It was such a pretty day, Dawn said, pushing the hair off her forehead. I told Ruby we should ride up. I was hoping you'd still be here. It's cooler up here, Ruby said. We should keep riding, Caleb suggested. Keep going to Cedar, maybe. I want to cool off a bit first, Dawn said, leaning her bike against the rocks. You know, we should start a bike club, Caleb said with great enthusiasm. Huh? Dawn narrowed her eyes at him. Yeah, a bike club, he repeated, undiscouraged. We're just about the only ones in Shocklin Falls who like to ride around everywhere in our bikes, right? Give me a break, Caleb, Dawn said, rolling her eyes. You ride that beat-up bike of yours because you can't afford a car, and your parents won't trust you with theirs. Smart parents, Ruby muttered, grinning. Hey, no way, Caleb protested. I'm really into bikes, you know. Dawn made a sarcastic face. I'm just saying we could get together every weekend or something and maybe ride all over the state, you know, plan different routes, bring food and stuff. I like the food part, I said, starting to feel hungry. I hadn't had much of a lunch. Forget it, Dawn told Caleb. I hate riding with you. You're too crazy, always showing off, trying to get yourself killed. Who? Me? Caleb protested, grinning. He had somehow conveniently forgotten about his little game of chicken with the truck a short while before. Hey, where's Jonathan? Ruby asked suddenly. Isn't he up here with you? Jonathan. I was so worked up about Ruby and my bike I had forgotten all about Jonathan. He was with you, I told Caleb. No, Caleb replied. I don't think so. We all turned toward the falls. No one there. The water roared down, a fine white spray rising from the cliff edge. Jonathan? I called. Jonathan, where are you? No reply. I turned toward the woods. No sign of him. When I turned back, Caleb was running to the cliff edge, a frightened expression on his face. Dawn and Ruby were staring at me. "Where is he?" Ruby demanded, as if I were hiding him. A wave of dread swept over me, heavy fear weighing me down, making it hard to breathe. I raised my eyes to Caleb, standing at the cliff edge over the falls, the exact spot where Jonathan had been standing. Caleb peered straight down, his features twisted in fear. "Did he jump?" he cried. "Did Jonathan jump?" Behind me, Ruby uttered a high-pitched scream of horror. Chapter 14. "No, no!" I heard a frightened voice shriek. It took a while to realize it was me. Caleb took a step back from the falls. "I don't see anything down there," he called, cupping his hands over his mouth to be heard over the roaring waterfall. "Look!" Ruby cried. We turned to the bike path. There was Jonathan, on his bike. Dust flew up on both sides of his bike as he pedaled furiously away. The four of us stood frozen in silence, staring after him, watching him disappear into the trees. He never looked back. When he vanished from view, I let out a long sigh of relief and dropped to my knees onto the ground. At least Jonathan hadn't jumped. I raised my eyes to Ruby and Dawn. Dawn had tears in her eyes. Her shoulders were trembling. I was so scared," she stammered. Ruby put a hand on Dawn's shoulder to calm her. First Louisa, then—" Dawn's voice trailed off. Caleb made his way back to us, his hands shoved into his jeans pockets, his head lowered. "Why'd he do that?" I asked him, my heart still pounding. "Why'd Jonathan run away like that?" Caleb shrugged grimly. "Beats me." "I really thought he jumped," Ruby said in a quivering voice. "Do you think he's mad at us for some reason?" Dawn wondered. She leaned back against the rocks and pushed her damp hair off her face. She looked very pale, very upset. "I knew we shouldn't have come up here," Caleb said heatedly. "It was too soon for Jonathan." "But he had already come up here," I told Caleb. "Last week, "Was it your idea?" Caleb demanded loudly, staring angrily at me. I gasped. In that instant, I realized that Caleb didn't like me. His outburst cut through me. I felt a stab of pain in my chest. He doesn't like me, I thought, staring up at him, studying his angry expression. "No, it wasn't my idea," I replied coldly, turning away from him. "Well, it was a bad idea," Caleb insisted. "Don't you have any idea what Jonathan's been through?" "Give her a break, Caleb," Dawn said, coming to my defense. "Annie knows the whole story." "Let's get out of here," Ruby suggested, pushing away from the rocks and reaching for her bike. "Let's ride somewhere else, okay? This place gives me the creeps. I keep picturing Louisa standing there." "Yeah, let's keep riding," Dawn quickly agreed. I think I'd better get home," I told them. "I'm so behind on my term paper. I threw away the notes I typed onto the disk, and then it was all erased. I'm practically starting all over again." "You sure?" Dawn asked, pulling up her bike. "It's too nice out to be stuck inside doing schoolwork." "I know," I sighed, "but I better do it." "Don't be upset about Jonathan," Dawn said as I retrieved my bike. "He's moody," she chuckled. "I guess you've noticed." I said goodbye to them and headed down the hill, pedaling hard. I am upset about Jonathan, I thought unhappily. I'm very upset. I thought this was a date. Why did he ride away from me and leave me there without saying a word? Why did he do it? That night I had a frightening nightmare. The dream was in black and white. Somehow, the darkness of it, the somber gray shadows, made it all the more horrifying. In the dream, I was standing at the falls. The water rushed down silently. The whole dream was silent. Not a sound, not a voice. I stared at the rushing water, watched it plunge to the dark rocks below without making a splash. It was cold up there. A wet chill fell over me, over everything. The sky was a cold charcoal gray, a dead gray. Someone stood at the edge of the cliff, someone dressed in black. I stared at her and listened to the silence. Mist rose up from the plunging waters, gray and cold. Even with her back turned to me, I realized it was Louisa. I called to her, but no sound came out of my throat. She turned around slowly. I stared at her face. I uttered a silent scream. Her skin was gone, her beautiful wavy hair rested on top of a grinning skeleton. Empty eye sockets stared at me blindly. Her jawbone lowered, revealing a mouth full of perfect white teeth. She turned quickly away from me. Once again, she resumed her stance at the edge of the falls. The water continued to sweep down in total silence. The sky darkened. Shadows rolled over the hard gray ground. I crept up silently behind Louisa. Closer, closer still. I knew what I was going to do. I raised my hands. I was going to shove her over the edge. Hands ready, I took another step. Another. Suddenly, my voice returned. I spoke. "I'm Jonathan's new girlfriend," I said as I prepared to push Louisa. "I'm Jonathan's girlfriend now." I said the words in a flat monotone without any emotion at all. The water flowed down, 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 silently. I reached forward. I started to push her, but as my hands lowered to her back, we suddenly changed places. To my horror, I realized that I was now dressed in black. I was now standing at the very edge of the Silent Falls. "I'm Jonathan's new girlfriend," I said. "I'm Jonathan's dead girlfriend." Was Louisa behind me now? Was Jonathan? I couldn't turn around. I could only look down. I knew that I was about to go over the edge, into the silently plunging waters. I knew that I was about to die. Silently, so silently, into the gray, churning waters below. The ringing of the phone by my bed woke me up. I sat up, startled, wide awake. The dream faded slowly. The gray shadows lingered. I blinked, once, twice. The phone continued to ring. I reached for it, then hesitated. The cold fear I felt, was it from the dream, or from the ringing of the phone? Should I answer it? Reluctantly, I lifted the receiver to my ear. "It's me," said a dry, whispered voice. Chapter 15. My breath caught in my throat. I shut my eyes. "Annie," the voice whispered, "is that you?" I swallowed hard. "It's me, Jonathan," the voice whispered. "Huh?" I cried. "Jonathan?" "Who'd you think it was?" he asked, still whispering. "What time is it?" I asked, squinting through the darkness of my clock radio. "Jonathan, it's nearly 2. "Oh, sorry." "Why are you whispering like that?" I demanded, my heart slowing to a normal pace. "I don't want my parents to hear," he replied. "They'll take away my phone if they hear me calling so late." "You scared me," I admitted. I thought you were someone else." "I just called to apologize," Jonathan said. "You know, for this afternoon." "Okay, go ahead," I said. "Apologize." "I apologize," he said earnestly. I chuckled. "Apology accepted," I told him. "You could have called earlier, you know." "I wanted to, but I had to go somewhere with my dad. Listen, Annie, I shouldn't have run off like that, but, well, it's hard to explain." "That's okay," I said, hearing how hard this was for him. I was so relieved that he wasn't mad at me, that he didn't blame me for some reason. "I shouldn't have suggested that we all go up there," he continued. "I mean, it was just too soon. You probably don't know about Louisa." "Yes, I heard," I interrupted. He was silent for a long moment. "Yeah, I guess everyone talks about it," he said finally, with some bitterness. "Dawn told me about Louisa," I said softly. As I said it, the dream washed over me. Again, I saw the silent falls, the shifting gray shadows, the girl dressed in black, standing on the very edge, about to fall. Was it Louisa, or was it me? "You want to get together tomorrow?" Jonathan asked, abruptly changing the subject. "We could go to a movie or something." "I wish I could," I replied. "I won't run away, promise," he quickly added. "I've got to work on my research," I said. "I'll never get that paper written at this rate." "Oh, I see." He sounded very disappointed. "Sorry," I said, and then I yawned loudly. "Guess I'd better hang up," he whispered. "I'm glad you called," I said honestly. We said goodnight and hung up. I lowered my head to the pillow and pulled up the blanket. When I closed my eyes, images from my frightening dream returned, as if they'd been waiting for me. No, I thought, opening my eyes wide, trying to drive the pictures away. No, I don't want to think about Louisa now. I don't want to think about this. "Jonathan didn't push Louisa," I whispered to myself, staring up at the dark ceiling. "Jonathan didn't push her. I know he didn't." I just gotten down to work the next afternoon, papers and books spread out all over the dining room table, when the doorbell rang. Since I was the only one home, I ran to answer it. "Dawn!" I cried out in surprise. She smiled at me. She was wearing a blue sweater over white tennis shorts. Her hair was tied loosely behind her head. "I really have to work," I told her, holding open the screen door. "I don't have time to—" "I know," she said, stepping past me into the front hallway. "I brought you a bunch of books." She lowered her shoulders so I could see the bulging backpack on her back. "You know, for research." "Hey, thanks!" I cried, genuinely grateful. "That's really nice of you. The library is closed on Sundays, so—" "I think it's all the stuff you can use," she said, groaning as she pulled the backpack off. I led her into the dining room, and she emptied the contents of the backpack onto the table. "I'll only stay for a minute," she said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. "Have you talked to Jonathan?" I told her about his late-night apology. "Weird," she said, and then, fiddling with her hair, she added, "Poor guy." Her expression changed to anger. "I've just about had it with his pal Caleb." "Huh? What do you mean?" I asked, sifting through the books she had brought, glancing at the titles. He's just impossible, Dawn complained, frowning. He's such a goof. He can never be serious. We went to the movies last night, and he called out funny remarks through the whole picture. The people around us were really angry. They didn't think he was funny at all. I thought they were going to punch his lights out. I tissed, only half concentrating on what Dawn was saying. I really did want to get back to work. Caleb's parents actually let him take the car last night, Dawn continued, sighing unhappily. They didn't let him drive it in weeks, so what did he do? He drove it into a ditch, and we had to be towed. Ah! She uttered a cry of total frustration, pounding both fists on the table. What a drag, I said, trying to sound sympathetic. Caleb really is a crazy guy. I'm going to make a change, Dawn said, locking her eyes on mine. I had the feeling that she had made up her mind just that second. I'm going to break up with him. I really am. I don't know why I've put up with him for so long. She climbed to her feet and picked up her empty backpack. She started to the doorway, then stopped. Don't say anything, Annie. To Caleb, I mean. Or to anyone. Okay, I agreed. In case I chicken out or change my mind, Dawn said. I suppose I should have said something nice about Caleb. Maybe that's what Dawn wanted. Maybe she was confiding in me, so that I'd defend Caleb and make her change her mind about breaking up with him. But I remembered Caleb's angry outburst, the way he shouted at me up at the falls. I remember the intense look of dislike on his face as he glared at me, and I guess I had decided that I didn't like Caleb either, so I didn't defend him. Dawn left, determined to break up with him. Before the screen door had slammed behind her, I had buried myself in my research books. I worked for a couple of hours, but my mind kept wandering. The hideous dream wouldn't fade away. It kept invading my thoughts, and I found myself daydreaming about Jonathan, making up conversations with him in my mind. My thoughts wandered to Louisa. I wondered what she was like, what her voice sounded like, what her laugh was like. I glanced up at the clock. It was a little past 4, and I haven't covered much ground at all with my research. I stood up and stretched, feeling restless. I couldn't sit there anymore. I had to get out, get some exercise. I had to clear my mind. I pulled a long-sleeved shirt over my t-shirt and hurried outside to get my bike out of the garage. It was a gray, overcast day. Heavy, dark clouds hovered menacingly low. I could hear the rumble of thunder in the distance. But I didn't care. I had to ride for a while. Maybe a long while. As I pedaled down the drive and into the street, the cool, damp air felt good against my hot cheeks. The wind brushed my hair back as I stood up and pedaled harder, picking up speed. Faster, faster. I wanted to ride faster than my thoughts. I wanted to ride away from the frightening dream, from Louisa's smiling face, from everything and everyone. Houses and lawns rolled past in a gray-green blur. A little kid in a yellow rain slicker waved to me from his driveway, and I waved back, but didn't slow my pace. Faster, faster. My heart was pounding. I could feel the blood pulsing at my temples. There were cold drops of rain in the air. The sky grew even darker. I rode past a high school, then turned onto a walk that led around the school. The walk ended behind the faculty parking lot, dark and empty. The distant thunder had become a steady rumble, moving closer. I headed my bike along the dirt path that led into the woods behind the school. I hadn't had a chance to explore these woods. Someone had told me they stretched on forever. The tall trees with their freshly unfurled leaves blocked out most of the remaining light. I felt a sudden flash of fear as I realized it was nearly as dark as night here. But I couldn't stop riding. I wasn't ready to turn around. It felt so good to be speeding through the cold air under the dark trees. At first, the only sounds were the whisper of the trees, the low rumble of thunder, and the scud of my bike tires along the curving dirt path. But then I heard another sound. Behind me. Close behind me. I turned and saw someone on the path, someone dressed in dark clothes, running after me. My dream suddenly flashed into my mind, all black and white like the figure chasing me. Panic gripped my legs. I wanted to speed up to get away from the dark dream. He was closing the gap, running at full speed, his shoes slapping the dirt noisily. Oh! I cried out as my front tire hit something in the path, a rock probably. I didn't have time to see it. The bike flew out of control. I saw the trees tilt. Then the ground came up to meet me. I landed hard on my side with a jolt of pain that ran up and down my entire body. The bike fell on top of me, the front tire spinning rapidly. He's got me, I thought.